Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick video about my transition from the Samsung Galaxy Note 2 on the left to the Moto X on the right. Now, over a year ago when I picked up the Galaxy Note 2, it was in my opinion, without any hesitation, the best smartphone ever made, combining an incredible screen, not only in terms of sheer size, but also technologically speaking, a Super AMOLED that really offered an experience unlike any other phone. And it was complemented by fantastic hardware. You know, under the hood, an A9 quad-core processor, 2 gigs of RAM, dual-band Wi-Fi, a solid 8-megapixel camera on the back, as well as a solid front-facing camera, Bluetooth, GPS, and essentially everything you could possibly want. And then to boot, you've got the S Pen, which still, at least to this point, outside of the Tegra Note 7, really there is no other offering unless you switch over to Windows and just stick to Wacom Digitizer experiences. There really are no other experience offerings like this in the mobile world. So Samsung really making a compelling product from just about every angle. The only downside really was expense and, again, size. You know, are you comfortable having a handset that arguably isn't something you can single hand? You know, this is a large phone. I don't care how tall or small you are. This phone is ginormous, even for LeBron James in his ads. I mean, granted, he could probably make any phone look small, but still, it's a ginormous phone no matter how you cut it. But that has not clearly shied anyone away from making this one of the most popular devices ever made. And the Note 3 and its launch and success of selling over 10 million devices speaks to that, especially since Samsung did away with this all-plastic design. Even though the phone is still made of plastic, it at least doesn't look like something that the Note 2 did, because I think that was the biggest gripe for any user. I mean, for me personally, it was that awful Verizon logo, but otherwise, the entire phone really did represent the best phone I had ever seen, used, and had the pleasure of enjoying. And quality control also top-notch. No problems with it out of the box. Now, yes, over the course of its lifespan, bugs did arise, GPS-related navigation, things like that. But for the most part, this thing even was able to take a beating, despite that plastic shell and the fact that, yes, I am using a flip cover here, the book-style cover, which really isn't a very large form of protection. This phone took incredible drops and is pretty much spotless, especially if I throw another cover on like I have here. No actual damage really to the silver finish on the body. And when I say some major drops, I mean it. Really just an incredible performer, very expensive. I did buy this unlocked outright retail, and the fact that I have that Verizon button that I keep showing really is disturbing, to say the least. I mean, Verizon should be ashamed of themselves for that. But let's just say people, or companies in this case, make mistakes, and hopefully they learn from them and move on. They didn't do it the second time around, so maybe they did learn. But the point is, this was a great phone. Now, there was no way that I could see myself a year later abandoning this phone for anything other than really the Note 3, especially not a phone with a smaller screen. Especially, I want to point out, this phone also offered battery life that was unparalleled. I know a lot of people are in love with the Droid Max lineup ever since it came out, but for a phone that isn't called the Max and isn't bragging about being a heavyweight in the battery department, the Note 2 really did redefine expectations. Now, in comes the Moto X, which is quite frankly dainty compared to the Note 2. I mean, this is a phone that, when you stack them up, they're just not in the same world. This is a completely different phone for a completely different consumer, or at least that's what you would think at face value. And I would have to agree, if the S Pen is something you must have, then you can't leave the Note brand. And I mean, that's part of them being Samsung distinguishing themselves from the competition. Motorola, on the other hand, this phone really represents the beginning, as I've been covering, of the company taking on Google, or rather Google taking on Moto and turning them into their manufacturing arm. So rather than seeing a gluttony of phones where Moto's trying to accommodate every consumer, like most Android phone manufacturers do, which is the opposite of Apple, a one-size-fits-all solution, Moto, at least here with the Moto X, did exactly that. They went for that Apple-esque approach of making a phone that's going to really satisfy everybody. Whether you're someone who's just looking for that stock experience, incredible battery life, A low price point, by the way, at retail, very clean, industrial, and also the ability to completely customize the phone, which isn't something I did because I have the Developer's Edition. But for those of you picking it up with the carrier of choice, whether it's the unlocked GSM for T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon, which aren't unlocked, by the way, only the T-Mobile one there for GSM, and that's because T-Mobile's month to month. Basically, you're looking at one of the best upgrades, in my opinion, that money can buy right now, because you're getting next-gen hardware, next-gen software at a price point that is just, not a fraction, but almost a third less than what the Note 3, not the Note 2, would cost you. I mean, in fact, right now, these two phones you're looking at side by side are almost the same price retail, even though this is a much younger phone. This phone came out August, September of 2013, whereas this is, from, I think, August of the previous year. Correct me if I'm wrong. So literally at least a year younger here in this phone. And we do have, even though an A9 processor that's competent here, quad-core, and really this was the first phone that blurred the line for me between, traditional smartphones and real computing, because I could do just about everything I needed to for business on here, something that really couldn't be done with a phone, at least not in a way that was actually pleasurable. And by that I mean, when you use a device and it can do what you want to do, but it does it in a painful manner, you really don't want to use it, right? Well, this phone could pull it off. Well, here now, I've got then that and then some, and that's because even though we've gone down in screen size to the 4.7-inch AMOLED, which glad to still stick with AMOLED. For those of you who followed my channel over the years now, you know that I've always been a very big fan of AMOLED displays, and that's because they're good for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into. But first and foremost, they're probably the most eye-pleasing displays on the market. And I can't wait to see some TVs, some 4K and eventually 8K displays. But going off topic, the point is that, yeah, it's a big drop down in screen size, but you're also getting a much smaller device, something that I think is arguably, when it comes to that one-size-fits-all approach, much more comfortable in the hand for the majority rather than the minority, which isn't a minority anymore. I told you over 10 million Note 3s sold already as of this past month. But clearly, the numbers for a smaller handset definitely larger than for the phablets out there, and that's something that I still can't get my head around. The first week that I used the Moto X, I really did not think that I was going to be able to truly drop the Note 2, but when it came to the processor, the software, and just everything this phone had, it really does equate to one of the best phones ever made. And when you look at the spec sheet and see that it's got an S4 Pro driving it, which is really an underclocked S600, not a best-in-class, Snapdragon 800 from Qualcomm like the Nexus 5 has, and it's got 2 gigs of RAM rather than 3 gigs like in the Note 3. I mean, it's missing a lot of these cutting-edge specifications. The screen also not 1080p or 1200p like a lot of brand new high-end phones. So these are some of the corners that were cut by Moto to deliver a device that, in my opinion, hits really the sweet spot on performance, value, and just basically setting a standard now for what manufacturers need to deliver at the very least if they're going to command $400, $500, $600 of our money, because the days of subsidized contract phones, I think, are slowly coming to an end. I mean, there's a reason Europe has been out of this for the most part for a long, long time, and it was just a matter of time before here in the States we caught up with that structure, and carriers realized that we would rather pay them for service than devices. And I know many of you may not agree with that, but I'm not getting into that debate today. It's kind of like healthcare. The point is that what you're looking at here is really just a phenomenal phone. The processor is great. GPS locks on instantly. That's another thing. I had some bugs with the Galaxy Note 2. As much as I love that device, when it came to GPS and navigation, this phone just kills it. And I don't know whether to attribute that to the fact that I'm running KitKat here, but because I didn't always have GPS issues with the Note 2, but there's no question that whatever Moto and Google have done here, and remember, this phone got KitKat before the Nexus 4, so it's clear that Google is not saying we're not playing favorites. They are. This is their own product, even if it's got Moto's brand on it. Google owns this now, folks, so they're not going to neglect their own baby. It's just that clear, and that's where this kind of becomes one of those sticky situations, sort of like when Microsoft said, hey, we're going to make Surface and Surface Pro, but we want all of you to make competing products too. And all the manufacturers went, why on earth would we want to directly compete with you? We're working together. Well, Google is now in that situation as well. They've got bona fide, true, if not one of the best manufacturers, in my opinion, that's been around at least as long as I've been on the planet. A US-based company where we're getting phones now made in America, which I think appeals to a lot of people on a lot of different levels because of labor laws and a whole host of different morality-based issues and just fair wages. And, you know, also if you're just someone who wants to be patriotic, you've got it here in an American-made device. You're not going to get that clearly with the Galaxy product. That really shouldn't factor in, I think, in terms of deciding on which device is right for you. But clearly every consumer is different, and that does actually, for some of you out there, I know matter. So I want to point that out. I mean, even Google's Glass now is made in the U.S. So this is a big theme for Google and now for Motorola, who clearly also used to do a lot of their manufacturing overseas. But the battery here is internalized. Here, you could pop it out. That was another thing I thought I wasn't going to be able to live without, but the battery life here has actually been better than the Galaxy Note. Another thing to point out, cameras. Unfortunately, no improvement. 10 megapixels back here, 2 here, but the cameras are better on the Note 2, both front and rear. So I'm not even going to begin to compare the Moto X cameras to the Note 3. You know they're going to be infinitely better. There's even 4K video capture on the Note 3. So Samsung definitely has a lot more polish when it comes to the gimmicks and all the different features, I think, that people look at and say, wow. But when you actually start using this phone and see that the dialer is better, that every element of the experience is better, and then if you're like me and you've got a developer's edition, you can do just a whole host of things that you can't with something like the Note 2 or 3 or any other competing phone for that matter. That's when it becomes clear why the Moto X, with its contextual process, the notification system, as well as just everything there, the touchless controls, all the voice commands, the ability to just say, okay, Google now, and wake the device up. I mean, these are things that just don't exist with other handsets. Yeah, you don't get the Google experience launcher that you'll get with the Nexus 5, but in my opinion, you're getting a better phone than the Nexus 5, even though you don't have that Snapdragon processor and that same 5-inch higher res screen. Everything else about the Moto X is just perfect, and that's very rare to be said about any phone. This is a phone that I can, without hesitation, and above and beyond hesitation, recommend to everyone. And I don't care what kind of user you are, power user, soccer mom, even the grandparents. It's just a great phone that stock kids, teens, everybody is going to like this phone. And that's where Moto really got, in my opinion, got everything right here on this device. One size fits all is only good if it really does fit. And this is the type of device, especially making Developer's Edition and the Moto Maker, it just speaks to really recognizing that one phone can be your backbone. The way Apple has made the iPhone their backbone, the difference is that it just took a lot more work. And it's finally here as far as I'm concerned, and still one of the most underrated devices on the market. Do I miss expandable storage? Sure. Just like I miss the ability to swap out batteries. But when the experience is so much better, so much cleaner, so much more efficient, and battery life is actually still better, I can't complain. And again, the lower res screen, even though, when compared to a lot of current phones, you do gain some resolution, I can't see the difference. This is one of the best looking displays I've seen, and that's because, well, our eyes are limited when it comes to screen displays this large. So a lot to like here with the Moto X. Again, to me, the biggest thing was really, again, transitioning to the smaller screen and also just getting used to less, in the hand here. But it's also been a gain when it comes to having more pocket space. Of course, if you bulk it up with a large case like the OtterBox that I unboxed a little while back, then it's going to detract from some of that form factor. But again, the design also just really nice. And even though this isn't made of steel or anything, certainly a much more high quality feel to it than the Note 2 or 3. So a little bit of a comparison, a little bit of a description of my journey, my transition. Again, I never thought I would go to a smaller screen. Everyone that knows me knows that I've said that for well over a year now, especially considering even my phone before this The Galaxy S3 also had a larger display than this, so I've actually technically de-evolved by 2 generations when it comes to screen size, and that shows you or speaks to exactly how potent, how incredible the overall experience is from the Moto X. So a lot of credit to Motorola and Google. This is one hell of a love child, a great handset, and I'm glad to own especially the Developer Edition, since that's as close as we're getting to a Nexus 5 on Verizon Wireless, which is still my carrier of choice because of their, at least in my opinion, best-in-class LTE coverage in the United States. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.